Good afternoon. All right, as you see here from the board, we are going to begin our figurative language part 2 lesson. All right, last week we talked about 3 different types of figurative language. Now we are going to add on to these. And this week, as you can see, we are going to be talking about personification, alliteration, and oxymorons. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is we are going to define each one, and then I'm going to give you an example. Okay, so let us start off with personification. All right, now we did talk about that one in 4th, so if you were with me in 4th grade, then you're aware of that one. But just in case you forgot or if you weren't with me, personification, that is the figurative language that we use when we give human qualities or traits to animals or objects. Okay, so of course, animals and objects, they don't speak unless you're talking about the occasional roof woof from your dog or meow meow from your cat, but those are noises that they make. They do not speak words. Objects do not come to life. I know we see that a lot of times in different fairy tales, different fiction stories, and different fiction movies, but that's what they're using. They're using personification because there is no such thing as a chair actually getting up and walking across the room. Okay, so what they use personification, and they give those human qualities to that object or to that animal so that that animal or that object is then brought to life. Okay, so an example here. An example would be, EX is for example. The sky is roaring thunder. All right, the sky is roaring thunder outside. Okay, now, if you remember from last week, that roaring, that's actually an example of what? If you said onomatopoeia, then you would be correct. All right, so the sky is roaring thunder outside. Can the sky roar? Is it a bear? Can it actually make a roaring noise? No, it doesn't actually make that sound. All right, it's not actually roaring with thunder. It's just telling you that the sky, that means that there's so much thunder outside that that's all you can hear. Thunder strike after thunder, rolling of thunder. Okay, so that's all this is saying right here. It's comparing the sky to the roaring thunder, and it's acting as if that sky came to life and roared thunder, just as if I did. But that is not what happened, as we know. It just means that there's thunder outside, okay, and most likely a storm on its way. All right, so let's move on to the next one, alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of the same initial, or in other words, beginning, sound. All right, so it's the repetition of the same initial beginning sound. All right, so this one definitely is more familiar to you guys. So some examples, not one that I'll write on the board, but some examples you might have heard in the nursery rhyme world, or, this one's always tricky. She sells she shells by the seashore, or Peter Piper pecked a pack of pickled peppers. Oh my goodness. All right, or you could also, one that you might know would be, oh, it just left my mind. I can't think of it. But anyways, those are 2 great examples. She shells, Peter Piper pecked a peck of pickled peppers, or how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? All right, so that is more the initial sound. All right, it is all about that sounds. Just because things start with the same letter don't mean they sound the same. So it's all about the initial sound of the word. Okay, so these are the tongue twisters. All right, these are tongue twisters. As you guys heard when I was trying to give the example, it's very difficult to say all of these at once, right? She shells by the seashore. Peter Piper pecked a pick of peppers. A peck of peppers, Peter Piper picked. It is a tongue twister. Your tongue's in there getting all jumbled up. So if it's not twisting that tongue, all right, and if you're not hearing that same initial sound over and over, then it's not alliteration. All right, so a good example here would be Mary makes Mike many model missiles. And let's go machines. All right, Mary makes Mike many model machines. So that initial sound you're hearing is Mary makes Mike many model machines. All right, and yes, the coincidence that they all do start with the same letter. Odds are that same sound is going to start with the same letter, but don't ever let them trick you because there are always exceptions to every rule. So make sure it's the initial sound, not just the same initial letter. Okay? All right, so last one that we're going to look at is oxymoron. All right? An oxymoron, oops, wrong column. No, all right. This is when you use two words and those two words contradict each other. All right, so contradict, if you remember, contradict just means they combat it. It argues against it. It's saying the opposite. So if I said I'm hot and you were being and contradicting me, you would say, no, it's cold, right? Cold would be the contradiction to hot. It would be the opposite of. All right, so they're opposites. They contradict each other, but we create phrases, and those phrases are figurative languages using oxymorons. So let me give you a couple examples that might help to make it a little clearer. So one example would be the living dead. All right? There's so much zombie talk, especially with everything going on with COVID, and people are saying, is this the apocalypse, the end of the world? And when people talk about zombies, they say that zombies are dead people, but that are alive. So that is the living dead, okay? So that is an oxymoron. You can't be alive and you can't be dead. You're either or. You're either alive or you're dead. So those two words contradict each other. So saying the living dead is outside, that's a contradiction. How can they be both alive but dead? Another example would be all right, now I got a couple students that can't enjoy that themselves, but they at least know what it is. Jumbo shrimp. Now, shrimp by definition is something that's really tiny. So how can you have something jumbo that's tiny? It's jumbo shrimp. All right, so that in and of itself, that is a contradiction. It's tiny, but it's big. Is it tiny or is it big? Big or tiny? I don't know. So jumbo shrimp would be another example. All right, so these are just several different examples for you with going along with oxymoron. But now you have the definition as well as some examples, at least one example with each of the three types we're learning about this week. Personification, alliteration, and oxymoron. All right, now really quickly before you get off the air with me, I just want to remind you what a fable is. Okay? So fables, if you remember, fables are a brief story with a lesson or a moral. All right, last week our focus was fairy tales. This week our focus is fables. So I just wanted to remind you from when we were in school and we did talk about the difference between fairy tales, fables, and folk tales, but I just want to remind you of what a fable was just in case it slipped your memory. All right, so like I said, it's a brief story with a lesson or a moral. Also, fables usually have some type of unusual or supernatural events that have occurred, okay? Usually the characters are the animals. That is one big distinction between fables versus fairy tales and folk tales. Usually in a fable, the main characters are animals, All right. And those animals are personified and talking. All right. And then lastly, fables are passed down from generation to generation. Okay, those are different stories that are passed down. Not the only stories passed down, but those are some of the important information pieces regarding fables. All right, so that's it for today, guys. You now have been reviewed on fables. We have reviewed personification and alliteration, or it might be new for you, depending on the student. But we have discussed personification, we have discussed alliteration, and we have discussed oxymorons. All right, 3 types of figurative language that we are going to be focusing on this week. All right, so that's it for today. Make sure when you're done taking notes that you take a picture and you send it to me via text, or via email. And I just want you guys to know how much I love you, how much I miss you, and hopefully I'll see you Thursday on our Zoom session. Bye, babes.